Funky fantasy, the bowl, Stratoceros, war of nerds, villains. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the War of Nerds podcast. I'm Nathan Helm, the Funky Fantasy Man.
I'm Alfred Muller, and I've been looking forward to this episode.
And I'm Ryan Morgan, also known as Stratoceros.
On the citizens want to know, we like them raw and regular. Anyways, this episode is about villains. Everything about them, writing them, imagining them, acting them, voicing them, for me more specifically, and creating them, which we're going to actually do for you later in this episode.
Spoilers, like a true villain.
And there'll be lots of evil villain laughs and all that good stuff. And we're going to talk about our favorite villains of all time from across literature, movies, etc., etc., etc. So, my first question to y'all is, what do you think of when you hear the word villain?
For me, it strikes antagonist right away, which I know is not always the case. But immediately I'm thinking conflict and motivation. Those are like the two things that pop in my mind right away when I hear villain. But I know we've talked about villains a lot, and we'll get into a lot of them, but like lately it's been redemption arcs. Like every time you see a villain, it's like, how are they turning into an assistant to the hero and less of the villain as a new villain steps out of the shadows? So, and that's kind of where my mind goes with that.
See, I
Very
think
nice.
villain and antagonist are different. So for me, villain is the enemy, the depending on who your main character is, the not necessarily just the opposition, but the mirror reflection of your main hero.
Interesting. I like that. Absolutely. 100%. The for me, the word villain, it's something that generally will strike fear into someone. And just the word itself, like you hear, they're the villain, and you're like, ooh, what makes them this, right? And then you want to know, so what led them to what was their inciting incident? What made them make their choices along the way? Did they have a traumatic backstory? Did they have something happen in their life where they were a good person, but they were wronged, or they were so screwed so hard by someone that they just flip sides and they're just like, you know what? Screw humanity, screw good. I'm going to get things through means of which I believe is right, whether that be justice or clarity or visionary or, they think of themselves as a philosopher, whatever it may be. So when I think of villain, I think of somebody who has motivation, not necessarily right or wrong, but they have motivation, and generally somebody who's been through something traumatic or did something traumatic that started them on their path. And that's what I think of with a villain, and generally somebody who has a really cool name most of the time.
You do want that to be memorable. Motivation between you and I was kind of a theme there. And not to like get into my own works, but to give an example that I'm familiar with, one of my heroes is trying to navigate a world that has a lot of rules in it, and the rules are unfair to certain parts of the group. And the flip side of that coin, the villain is trying to uphold those rules So in his mind, the hero is the villain because he's breaking these rules and he's trying to exact justice for the breaking of those rules. But in the hero's mind, he's being oppressed by those rules, and therefore the villain upholding them is the villain. So I mean, like, I hear this a lot when I listen to other people talk about this subject, but the villain is the hero of their own story and the hero the villain. So that what Alfred was talking about with that mirror reflection there,
Mhm.
that kind of brings that full circle with that. So
I love that. I think that's a
But
great way to put it.
yeah, but obviously, when the villain's written, they are the villain because they truly are doing evil things. While as in their own head, we, the audience, see it and we're like, that's bad, that's
mhm.
evil, right? We classify them as the villain. Our hero classifies them as a villain, but they don't understand what said villain had to deal with.
Mhm.
Are they being controlled by somebody else? Have you simply stumbled upon their territory? Somebody came into a land that they've had for so long and took a piss in their cottage field and cabbage patch, whatever you want to think of it as. Um, like Merry and Pippin stealing the cabbage and vegetables from the farmer in Lord of the Rings. Something like that, where this villain, they weren't a villain, they were just living their everyday life. And all of a sudden, their entire village is just ransacked by raiders, pirates, merchants, whatever. And at that point, after, they go forth to seek revenge in their eyes because those people who came to their land were the villains, kind of like what
Mhm.
you were talking about, Ryan. Or they had a tragic loss in their life. Like, for example, in my book, because again, we know what we write best, Malice is the overarching villain, and he manipulates and deceives all of the other mini scale villains to do his bidding while he's trapped away.
Mhm.
And so it's like these individual mini scale book villains are doing bad things, but really, are you mad at them or are you mad at the person behind it all? And it goes to like, how much self control does one person have? Can they have? How evil are they really, or have they just lost their mind? Is it more of a sad story than it is more tragic and sad? Um, man, villains are awesome. They're my favorite thing to write. I mean,
They're
Yeah.
straight
very
up.
fun.
I I think too, for me, when I'm writing a villain, I want there to be an element of, uh, for example, a major character everybody knows, Darth Vader. I want there to be an
Mhm.
element of you believe Luke can turn Vader back to the light side. But for me, when I write villains, if they're a true villain in my world, I don't often see them turning back like Vader did. They're more like Sidious, where they could be corrupt, they could be even in a sense Vader, where he's fallen, but there's a redemption there. He could turn back, but they don't, and that's what makes a villain. At least when I write them, is they can't come back. They've gone too far, and they choose willingly not to come back. Whereas more of an anti-hero antagonist or a lesser problem character for my main character have a chance to convert and become almost like an anti-hero or something like that. Uh, so I think that's a good distinction for my writing between a true villain and then just an antagonist.
Absolutely.
And see, I disagree with you on that. I know, right? We disagreed on something. Holy cow. The War of Nerds has truly become what it's meant to be.
um,
I do believe you have antagonists, like you were saying. However, I do believe that you can have villains who are the villain, but they're a villain because they're misguided, they're controlled, or they've been lost for so long and they needed somebody to pull them back. Something was still inside of them, and when the right person came along, when they had the ability to make that choice at the end, they did choose to go back and live their life. But they did live life as a villain. And whether it was by their own intentions, like they chose to do everything they did in that path along the way, or they were being forced to do it, they were still the villain during that time. That's
yeah,
the way I look at it.
that's fair.
Um, But that's cool. We disagreed on something. I like it. That like never happens.
So like you
And
have
and
more
I
of
think
like
that's
a
a
Thanos-esque idea because like Thanos was the villain and then he retired, but everyone still saw him as the villain even though he was done and I've retired as this person. I just want to live my life now.
Mhm.
But sorry, Ryan, what were you
So
saying?
who would well, I mean, play off of that. I can go back to my other point later. So who in the game would be the villain if Thanos retired in your mind?
Thanos.
So the second version of Thanos, or is it they're fighting against the situation and then the second Thanos is created through their own works and therefore they bring forth a second villain?
So
Nah, it's
yeah, go Nathan.
oh, I was just gonna say no, I don't think so because Thanos always was the villain. He had slaughtered half of life in the universe. Yeah, they chopped off its head, but they had to fix things.
Hmm.
That was the whole point. They had to fix things. So even though Thanos, a younger version, it's the timeline. That's the whole thing. It goes back to saying they're going to always be the villain because that's what they were destined for. That's who they are. So Thanos was always the villain. He just happened to get another opportunity, even though he was killed in the future or
For
different
me,
world, whatever you want to call it. Or
Thanos is the villain just because if you asked him, I don't think even though he quote unquote retired, he wouldn't have changed his mind. He retired because he accomplished his goal. If he hadn't accomplished his goal, he'd still be pushing to eliminate half of life in the universe. And that is
mm-hmm.
something that is distinguishable for me is he wouldn't have changed his mind. He wouldn't have decided, "Ooh, I did wrong." He was happy with himself. That's why he retired. He's like, "I accomplished my goal. I won. I did exactly what I wanted to do. Now I could just sit around and do nothing." But his uh, beliefs and his values were always the same: eliminate half of life so that the universe can continue.
I can see that. So I mean, just thinking from it, like objectively, you see Thanos die, villain is gone, extinguished. Yes, everything he did still existed, but there for a chunk of the movie until they're reintroduced to the next version of Thanos that they encounter, they're fighting against their own situation, which would be that situation is the antagonist in that situation, not so much a villain. And then by their choices, they bring about another villain,
Yeah,
which is
so
a
in that
different
case,
version of Thanos.
they have minor antagonists throughout. So like the scenarios they put themselves in, Red Skull,
Hmm.
he's technically an antagonist, not a villain, because he's got a almost like a riddle-esque scenario. You have to figure out X in order to get the Soul Stone, or even the Doctor Strange's mentor, I want to say the one, but that's the Matrix. The elder individual, she is a gatekeeper of a bit of knowledge
Yep.
that the Hulk has to figure out, and so on. You have smaller, minor antagonists and antagonistic situations until, like you said, their actions bring in Thanos. But I think that's
Hmm.
where the
Well,
antagonist difference from villain is.
Sure.
I will say though, one of the best villain quotes of all time is, "I know what it's like to lose, to feel so desperately that you're right, yet to fail nonetheless. It's frightening, turns the legs to jelly. But I ask you, to what end? Dread it, run from it. Destiny arrives all the same. And now it's here. Or should I say, I
That is a good
am.
one.
It is.
The Power Stone or your brother's head? I assume you have a choice. Oh, I do. Kill away. Uh, we have a Hulk.
Ah,
So playing off of that, we've kind of defined a villain a little bit. Do you guys like or veer towards morally gray villains where their actions can become justified to where you almost align with them when you're watching a movie or reading a book? Like a good example would be Killmonger in Black Panther, where a lot of people were like, I mean, he's doing terrible, horrible things, but he's making a little too much sense right now that I almost can justify his actions? Or are you guys starkly away from that?
I don't think there are morally gray villains. I think morally gray characters exist. Those are people more like you have the whole gray Jedi thing, right? Those are similar to Mike morally gray characters. There's somebody who's generally neutral or good, but they walk a very fine line that do questionable things that makes you wonder, can I trust that individual? They're doing something a bit dark, but they say it justifies the means. Well, Killmonger is just a savage. He's going through and just murdering people for the countless reason of murdering them because he feels like he was oppressed. Whereas Black Panther is just like, I understand what you mean, but we should try to bring peace. Why not try to do it this way? All Black Panther wanted to do was help people in the end, no matter what happened to him or his people in the past. He wanted to move forward and do the right thing. Whereas Killmonger wanted to literally kill Black Panther. Then he wanted to remove all of the flowers that gave Black Panther their ability, burn it all, and then he wanted to go through and basically just be a dictator slash conqueror. So to me, that's a villain. That's a bad person, no matter if they say they're justifying it at all. So yeah, for me, I don't think there is a morally gray villain. I just think there's morally gray characters.
Okay.
And we disagree again. I love this. I
Right, let's go.
Round 2.
I find the morally gray more interesting. Now, again, so I'm going to compare to Thanos is a major villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Apocalypse is a major villain in the DC, in the Marvel Universe also, but
Marvel
the
Universe.
X-Men specifically.
Yep.
I think in the X-Men movie with Apocalypse, they did a horrible job creating Apocalypse. I feel like he was flat, and they built him up as evil, McTwirly mustache evil villain, doing evil for evil's sake. And most people didn't like that movie because it was boring. Thanos is, I think, what you were trying to get at, Ryan, with the morally gray aspect, where what all he wanted to do was make sure that the universe could survive. We were overpopulating. We were becoming a parasite on the universe, draining its resources, and everybody would die at a certain point. So his values were in the right place. The way he went about it was wrong. Now, where I somewhat agree with Nathan is that the villain, like I said earlier, is the villain. They are doing bad things and kind of understand that what they're doing is viewed as bad, even if they don't necessarily see it that way. But they are still doing bad things. And the way I see it is they've chosen something to do and they believe it. Regardless of what the reason is, they believe it. And the way they go about it is the problem. Similar to Magneto. He crosses over into, again, survivor of the Holocaust, horrible event. You survive something like that, you never want it to happen again. And Magneto kind of goes in does a 180, a complete crosses over from just preventing it to happen again to almost causing it again, because he doesn't want mutants to be exterminated, so his desire is to exterminate humanity. So the morally gray villain is a villain you can get behind. You can be like, that's making a lot of sense. What they're saying is kind of hard to argue against, but their decision on how they go about it is where they become the villain, and what I find most interesting.
See, I don't consider Magneto a villain.
But he is in certain people's minds, like as far as like you have the hero villain arcs, he'll be a villain at times, but then in other ones he's more aligned with them. But I have another one to bring up later, so continue.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I love Magneto. I think he's one of the coolest characters ever. And he does do some pretty bad things, but I don't feel like he's ever gone. He's never a full villain. He's never completely gone. He's got his mind. He knows exactly what he's doing. And him and Charles have legitimate conversations back and forth with each other, and they come together. A villain doesn't come together with a hero and work with them very often, unless they have something deep inside of them that it's benefiting them for their means and their journey, or they're not really a villain at all. They're just pretending to be because they're hurt or they're sad or they're broken. Magneto's all of those things, believe it or not. It's not portrayed in that necessarily in that way, but he is. He's hurt. He's sad. Charles was his best friend when they were younger. So I would be pretty betrayed feeling that way. Um, so the things that he does, like I was honestly on Magneto's side. I was against humanity when it came to X-Men. Because the government was doing some questionable things. All you need to look to is X-Men Origins. You can see what Stryker and all those people were doing, or Civil War. There's another prime example. I'm very anti-government when it comes to those movies, so I'm actually on the team of whoever is. I'm on humanity's side, but I'm also against the government. So therefore, I loved what Magneto did in the movies because he was sticking it to the government, and he wasn't really hurting innocent people all that much. Sometimes he did, but he said it was collateral damage for the good of mutant kind, right? So there's some questionable things he says. There's some things that could portray him to be a villain, and he did have arcs where he was, like I said, you could have where you're an arc as a villain, but you leave that. All right. So for me, Magneto is we're splitting hairs with him because it's just really difficult to be able to label him as either or. I just label him as morally gray, and he's one of my favorite characters. So
I think that his values will not change. He believes X, and that's where I classify him as a villain, because he wants to do things. And the other problem too is when you get into superhero genre, you have supervillain and superhero. And the superheroes are often portrayed like Captain America, where they're like, there shouldn't be any collateral damage. I will save everybody, and anybody who does die is too many. So for a character in that genre to turn around and say, well, they're just collateral damage. Well, in real life, I mean, the unfortunate fact about like war and fighting is there is collateral damage sometimes. It's tried to be mitigated as much as possible, and we bring people up on war crimes when it isn't. But the idea that you have a superhero who says no one should be collateral damage, and you have a villain who says, well, collateral damage is okay because my end goal is the most important outcome. And that's why I still classify Magneto as a villain.
That's fair. I do see your point there. This is why I generally align more with characters like Deadpool and Punisher, because I like anti-heroes. Venom too. I like people who are willing to bend the rules. Again, those are your morally gray characters right there. They're not villains, they're not heroes. They're anti-heroes. They're morally gray.
My favorite line from Daredevil,
and I align with those people better,
is, you know what's wrong with your way, Red? When you knock them down, they get back up. When I put them down, they stay down.
Yep.
Love that.
Oh man, the Punisher was so good.
Moment, those two. Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
It is, man. No, it's okay. That's why I like anti-heroes. That's why I like people who draw that line and they're willing to do what must be done to get. No, I said that wrong. They're willing to do certain things to get their task done, and they still want to protect the innocent. But they have some things happen along the way where you're kind of like wondering. It's a very, very internal, it's a very mental battle for our anti-heroes. It's a very back and forth. Usually a lot of them have psychosis or ADHD or split personality or a lot of different things going on. But we could tangent on that for a long time. I'm loving that we're not agreeing on everything in this episode. This is just, wow, this is beautiful.
Your answer, Ryan.
Well, so I do not enjoy writing morally gray villains. I do believe they exist. I don't like them. I would rather have clearly defined who is the evil and who is in the wrong. But I do understand the morally gray situation, and just touch on a little bit of what you said, Nathan. If they work with the hero at some point, you classify them as like coming back in like a redemption type situation, or Like they
No,
were going leaning evil and then come back, or like just a
no,
okay.
no. It's if I like I said, if a villain is working with the hero, generally it's because it's going to help the villain with
Hmm.
something that they need to accomplish. So it's selfish means for their own selfish ambitions.
Okay.
Or possibly during that time with the hero, they start to feel remorse. They start to feel doubt on if what they're doing is actually the right thing and if this path they've been on for the last 5 years is what they should still be on. So I think when you have villains and heroes that work together, they're aligned because they have one singular. Anime does it a lot. Anime
Hmm.
does it a lot. They both have the same intentions, but they are not on the same side.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes it can lead to the villain a redemption arc, as I like to call it.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a hit or a miss with that.
Okay. I was just kind of curious to elaborate
Oh
on that,
yeah.
but yeah. But I do not enjoy writing them, um, nor do I like relating with a villain, because then when you start to justify their actions, it makes things less fantasy and more real world for me, where like you see the real problems out there and a lot of people make questionable decisions just going with the flow. And that's where I see that morally gray, where I'm sacrificing my own morals just to not rock the boat, essentially. But so I steer away from that. I like clearly defined, this guy is evil, but I can't have a villain who is evil just for the sake of evil. There has to be that motivation for why they chose to do what they do, or why they're against the hero of the story, for me personally.
And see, that's
Okay.
interesting because your main villain in book one, I feel, could dabble in the morally gray. Like he obviously is evil. He's very but he fits my definition of he has values that he sticks to, and they may
Mhm.
be bizarre values, they may be values that others can't agree with, but he believes in them and he's gonna do everything he can to make that happen. Uh so I didn't I definitely thought that you had motivation for your villain and that it wasn't a twirly mustache villain. So uh,
Well, that's cool to hear that interpretation. I thought of it as abuse of power, but like digging deeper, that you might be onto something there a little bit. Yeah.
yeah,
See, I like to hurt people, so I write psychotic, sociopathic, hurt villains who are doing bad things because they've been hurt in some way, shape, or form,
Mm,
and they've lost themselves. Either they've lost their mind, they've lost their will to do any good anymore. They just believe that humanity is a sin and that that's just nothing left to live for. So and it's the hope of being reunited with their loved ones again, right? The promise that immortality, bring your loved ones back to death. Well, you're talking about raising the dead. That's a very fine line of messing with. Raising somebody from the dead is not something that you should do. When somebody is dead, they should stay dead. However, there's always consequences for every action that you take, real world or fantasy. So I like to portray that in my villains, whether they stay one or not. While they are one, I like to make people question if they should feel bad for the villain and like, oh man, I feel bad for them because I like to write horrific backstories. And then I
mm,
make them do these horrific things to make people like go back and forth and question like how do I feel about this? So that's what I like to do with villains. And then I have one villain who is just like the maniacal overlord who is just he's not evil for the sake of evil because I think that's just stupid. I think you should
mm,
always have a reason for why your villain's doing something, whether they're like the more philosophical type like Thanos and they believe they're doing the right thing. It was like later, like, the Celestials coming back. Thanos was protecting people from the Celestials, maybe, right? That's theory territory. But if you have villains who are doing things for those reasons, it's evil to everybody else because they're slaughtering thousands of people for not joining their cause. They may promise a promised land or whatever else, but at the end of the day, they believe what they're doing is right, but they truly are a sack of evil crap at the end of the day. Um,
mm.
so, man, I love villains. And that brings me to a question for both of you. What are your three favorite villains across everything, everything. That's comic books, manga, anime, live action, TV shows, movies, books, video games, whatever, you name it, something that you connected with, your three favorite villains of all time.
Ooh,
You have an answer, or do you want me to go?
you can go first.
Hit it, Ryan.
All right. So I don't know why I'm obsessed. Maybe it was nostalgia, and I say that word all the time on this podcast for me. But Frieza, and I know Frieza comes back later on, spoilers, and kind of has a little bit of a redemption, but still always
Elvin
has that
Frieza.
back and forth. But Frieza is one of my absolute Dragon Ball Z villains, and I love like his lines, his creation, and how he interacts with the heroes, and it's one of my absolute favorites. Second would have to be, well, it's probably first, but I didn't want to say it first, but Kaiser Soze in the movie The Usual Suspects.
Nice.
If no one's ever seen it, I will not spoil anything, but it is a complete mind twist of a movie that you don't see it coming till the end. But horrible backstory, like Nathan mentioned, justifying his terrible actions over the next X amount of years. Those are two. If I third, I don't know, I'd be reaching because not thinking about it ahead of time, but
We can come back if you want to think about your
yeah,
third.
let me think about my third.
Okay.
I've got
Alfred, do you
three.
need some more time? Or okay.
I've got them, but they could swap because I'm sure there's movies I'm not thinking of and
Mhm.
things that I'm not thinking of, books in general. But I'd have to say
We can come back to
Kilgrave
it.
from Jessica Jones. I
Mhm.
David
love
Tennant.
his, besides the actor, because I mean David Tennant is phenomenal, obviously, but
Get back
uh,
here,
the
Jessica.
character, the powers he has, the ability he has, and just that knowledge that I could make you do anything that I want, and I've used that to selfish means, is one of those philosophical villains. Even if he isn't philosophical himself necessarily, which I think you could argue he might be. The questions he brings up, like what would you do if you had those powers, really interests me. Thanos from the MCU. Again, I love, like, this is going to make me sound horrible, but I understand where he's coming from when he's saying we're kind of destroying a lot of
Yeah.
stuff and we're kind of like a parasite. So I get that. The way he went about it, maybe not the best. And then
Mhm.
this one is probably going to be controversial. Broly, the original Broly from Dragon Ball Z. I was going to say Frieza too, but I wanted to go different. Uh, I love that he is just a mindless meat machine, but he has a reason, even though
Mhm.
it's the dumbest reason people argue about because Kakarot was crying in a crib next to him. But
Team 4-star.
yeah, he's got he's got PTSD for whatever reason, and he cannot be beat by your hero. He's got the opposite of plot armor for the hero. He's got plot armor as the villain. He can't be beat. He's insanely powerful, and he's just going to pummel you until you find a way to get away from him. And I love that aspect of him.
Alfred, do you remember Team 4-stars? Like, so awesome, but he's so bleep bleep dumb. Oh my gosh.
They're so
Um,
great.
oh my gosh. Ryan, did you think of your third brother before I go?
uh yeah, so I'd probably have to go with Agent Smith from the Matrix series
Nice.
because
That's a good
I
choice.
I
Good
really
one.
liked his interactions again. Because for me to like fall in love with a villain, I have to like their interactions with the hero. If I don't like their banter or the reason they're fighting, it falls off for me. So definitely that one.
Mr. Anderson.
Nice. So
My
Kilgrave is
name
an amazing
is
villain.
Neo. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I love it. So Alfred took one of mine actually. Kilgrave's one of my favorites. He has been. Actually, that was the first time I'd ever seen David Tennant in another role besides Barty Crouch Jr. Saw that before I binged Doctor Who. So now all I think of is David Tennant as the Doctor. But before that, it was "Get back here, Jessica!" Like, but since you took that, I'm gonna flip. So Loki is one of my favorite villains of all time. He is most well-rounded villains with one of the best stories, the best morals, and the best reasons for why he's doing what he's doing. And Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of the character threw it over the top for me. Um, so and he's not really evil. That's the thing. Loki's not evil, really. It's just he is a villain, but he is. Loki's a tough one to put a nail on the top of, but love him. Another one for me is Pain from Naruto. Pain is one of the best anime villains. And again, he's one of those, like a villain like I like to write, a horrific, tragic backstory. When you actually learn about what Pain actually is in Naruto, you understand that Pain's not actually really Pain, but that's spoiler territory, so I'm not going to ruin it for people. But Pain he has some of the best lines in all of Shippuden for any villain. Everybody's just like, well, Madara Uchiha or Obito, or I'm not like, no, Pain all the way. It's the best arc in the entire show. And it's the most emotional, and just Pain and his story, and you really feel for him, even though he's the villain at that time. So Pain is one. That's my second one. And my third one, which is really, really hard to put a nail on this one, but man, I'm going to have to go with Mr. Mistpidalic from the DC universe. And he is a very non-conventional type villain. He's a very much trickster, playful type of villain, but you realize that he's not to be trifled with. He's put people like Superman, Flash, and countless other gods into. He's very much like a Q-like character from Star Trek. Q's viewed like a villain when he first appears, but the more you get to know him, he's just bored with his existence, and that's kind of what makes him. He wants to see what good is out there in humanity, and if there's anything worth left letting people go on with. So I'd have to say Mistpidalic. It's a toss up between him and Joker, because it's Joker.
Yeah.
And if I thought harder about it, I'm sure I could think of some other live action TV show or movie villains. Um, I was gonna say Doctor Evil just to be funny, because Doctor Evil's an awesome villain.
But yeah,
You know.
I do have I
Um,
have an honorable mention, and we brought him up in the Marvel, but Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin is I love.
mhm.
That's what made that series for me, with him being who he like. That portrayal, that kind of villain is just also phenomenal for me.
Man, he was such a good Kingpin,
Mhm.
man. And we've already talked about how we like to write our villains. A lot of our stuff is bled out through our choices and our favorite villains and how we've described things. Um, so I'm gonna do a little trial here. Let's say that you had, for you, Alfred, Kingpin was thrown into an alternate reality where he loses his memory, and he's thrown in there with Daredevil, who also loses his memory. Are those two characters going to get along, or are they going to still butt heads?
I think they would get along because Kingpin is only trying to do things to make things better. That's his whole moral crux, is he wants things to be better. The only way he knows how to go about that with his backstory is using his brute strength and his intelligence as a mob boss. Daredevil would still
Yep.
be blind and need help, even though he would probably start to figure out his powers again. I think Kingpin would
Mhm.
help him, and Daredevil would Matt Murdock would rely on uh, Kingpin, and they would Vincent Fisk, and they would work together. But it's one of those things that I love. I think that they're kind of polar opposites because they've chosen to take different paths, even though they've had similar backstories.
And speaking of Daredevil, I just have to say Stick's an awesome character.
Mm-hmm.
How about for you, Ryan? Let's say Frieza was thrown through a portal with Goku, and they both lost their memories, which is not really too far of a fetch for Goku.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say they both lost their memories. They'll eventually get them back slowly. They're thrown through a portal into an island, and are they going to get along, or are they going to butt heads?
I think based on do they keep their personality despite losing their memory?
Yeah,
That's
they
a
keep
fun
their
question.
personalities. I mean, their personalities are foundly based within
Yeah.
their soul and their psyche. So
I truly think that would be one of those pairs that doesn't work well together because I think Goku would be competitive by personality, and I think Frieza would be um, guarded by personality, and I think would therefore be offended if he were to lose any competition, whether it be like they're surviving on an island and Goku finds more coconuts than Frieza. I think immediately that would cause some sort of conflict between them, and everything after that would be just building on that animosity between them, and everything would become a competition as opposed to can we survive this together? So that would be
okay.
my answer for that.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And you guys have to ask me. You have to pick my characters.
You got it, Alfred?
I want to use Kilgrave. I know I chose him, but he's one of your favorites. But I
Yeah,
don't
go
know if I
ahead.
want to
That's
use
fine.
Jessica Jones or not.
It doesn't have to be. It
You got a hero we could throw at him?
can be anybody.
For Kilgrave, no. It would be funny to see Joker Batman if you went off of that flex third pick there on an island on their own and how they would interact with each other in that scenario with their minds wiped.
Yeah, let's do
But if
Joker
you have
Batman.
someone for Kilgrave, okay.
Okay, Bruce Wayne and Joker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so that's a tough one.
I know.
I think that they would get along because Joker wasn't always evil. He was actually just a decent person before all the tragedy led to him becoming a psychopath. So therefore, they lose their memories. They forget about their parents being killed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they would get along. The question is, would their newfound friendship be strong enough, their new bonds, to overweigh their memories when they come back? Would they be able to forgive and forget? Um,
I don't
and
think
for
Batman would.
Kilgrave, I mean, you could.
I don't think Bruce Wayne would be able to look past all the evil that Joker did, depending on when this happened. I think Joker might
Yeah, I don't
be
think
willing
so.
to, but that's where the interesting part between them. What do you got, Ryan?
I disagree for once. I'm gonna throw
Okay.
down the war this time. Um, I think Bruce Wayne would be able to forgive because he's not the type to kill his villains. He keeps putting them into Arkham Asylum with the hope that they're off the street. And eventually, the idea of Arkham Asylum is to rehabilitate these villains. They're just such far fetched villains that most of them are beyond redemption. But if they're going through this and they survive something like this together, I think he would still be leaning on the I found the redemption for Joker. And if Joker shows a hint of I'd be willing to work with Bruce Wayne or Batman, I think that would flip the switch and he would let him go in that scenario and forgive. But that's my take on it.
You've
I kind of
you
like that.
definitely give me some stuff to think about. It hasn't changed my mind, but that's definitely some good stuff to think
Yeah.
about.
I like it. Now, favorite. Oh, you know what? Forget Miss Pitalik. Sorry. Hello, Darth Vader.
I thought about Darth Vader after we were talking, but I was like, I'm glad we went with non-traditional, obvious ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Darth Vader's my honorable mention. There we go.
Yeah.
Now, my last question before we get to creating our villain, as we promised our audience, what is your favorite species of villain from any show, movie, whatever? It can be an inorganic life form. It can be organic. It can be whatever you want.
Do you have an answer, Nathan, already? Or
Yeah, I'm going to say the Daleks from Doctor Who because they're just simply fantastic. So for me, that's my favorite villain species. And if I had to have a close second, it would probably be the the Krell from Star Trek.
Okay.
it's a good answer too. You have one, Alfred?
Yeah, I'm gonna go old school. The apes from Planet of the Apes.
That's actually a really
Nice.
good pull. I like that.
It is.
So I'm not huge in like horror type movies, but I don't know if this counts as more sci-fi or more horror. And I wasn't a huge fan of the series, but I love the concept of the character. But the Predators in the Predator series, I think they're just such a cool hunter type species, and they make great villains for what they are. But again, they're just hunting on a planet. Is it for us experiencing that hunting against us, terrible, evil thing? But for them, that's their culture. So it's one of those where, like, is it a villain or is it just a situation? But I would say it's a villain, and it's definitely a
I like
species. Like, I like that one. So
I do like that one. That's a
I
good
like
choice.
that. All right. Dun, 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 dun. Villain creation time. So
this could be
we're
fun.
creating a villain from scratch. I've got a bad feeling about this. So what do you guys think about Hatarok for the villain name?
Say it one more time.
Hatarok.
I like that.
I do like that.
It's got a good ring to it.
It is copyrighted to my book series, but we can use it for our character creation. So it's up to you guys.
I'm cool with it.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So
I was thinking that or like Tarja or Taranja. But Hatarok is kind of, it bites.
Could be first.
Yeah,
and
I
last
like
name.
that one because it kind of also has like that. It could be a regal name. It could be a very hard name. It could be a brutish name. It has some like flexibility with like what it could portray. So kind of opens some avenues. What kind of a personality do we want in our villain? Are they meek and overcompensating for that meekness? Are they strong?
Lawful evil, intelligence over strength.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think almost regal with the name. Maybe not necessarily a king or a lord, but some type of authority and title with that individual.
Ooh.
I like that.
Especially
Lord
with the intelligence.
Hatarok Jar.
Lord Hatarok. And then what was the last one?
So
Jar.
it's Lord and then Htarok and then Jar. Jaah. Well,
Okay.
Jarh. It could be a silent R. Ja. Whatever you want.
Yeah. I like that. So intelligence over strength, lawful evil, kind of regal. Motivation. Why are they so bent on doing the... Go ahead.
I'm gonna go classic route and say jealousy.
Jealousy.
Ooh, jealousy.
Okay.
The Mhm.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the land of Wendendell had a king, and King Charles or King Arthur or whatever, some king who had been ruling over their people for a time. And Lord Hatarok was the leader of a member of the council and a one of the trainers for the military and magic wielders. But he grew up in poverty, and he was always looked down upon because he shouldn't have been able to get to the position that he got by hard work. He should have been given his position based on family lineage or wealth, which he wasn't.
So
He
so
was
kind of like a Peter Baelish.
almost, handpicked by royalty because of his abilities and because of his
Okay.
loyalty and because of his intelligence.
I also think there should be some type of maybe not necessarily an election, but a vote of some sort to determine the kingship, and there's some type of trial or exhibition that takes place, and intelligence over strength, he outsmarted and won by the rules, but nobody acknowledged it because they weren't smart enough to figure out his convoluted way of whatever he did. Technically, he should have won, but because he is so much more intelligent than the others around him, they didn't see what he did or whatever. Like his accomplishment was overlooked because it was too far beyond their grasp of things, and someone else took the throne.
He's able to understand knowledge at a quicker rate. Therefore, he was able to come up with a spell or an attack or a fighting move that allowed him to win against his victor when he was chosen for his role to serve. And later down the line, say 10 years, King Balish, King whatever, King Balish Homabay, I don't know, whatever, was getting ready to actually give Hatarok the kingship. They chose to go away from the route of family lineage and actually choose him as the next rightful king. But people became jealous, and they assassinated the king and placed the assassination on Hatarok, and he was exiled from his kingdom.
I like that. So
King, King
what?
Cesari,
How does he?
something almost
What was
elvish,
King
that,
what?
Alfred?
King Cesarian or something with a to go against the hard K in
Mhm.
our villain.
Okay.
King Seiron,
Ooh, I like that.
All right.
Sayron, or Sairon,
Okay.
Ron, excuse me. Um, Seiron's very elvish, has a feel like that to it. Um,
So he uses his intelligence a lot. Is he a magic wielder? Is he a
I say
manipulator
magic.
of people? Magic.
I say magic.
magic and yeah,
Now, here's the
and
fun
He's
part.
combat smarts.
Should it be an
okay.
innate ability that he cannot boost through intelligence, or is it something he learned?
He learns everything through his intelligence. Through studying books, through pushing the means beyond what most people would do, because he's willing to. He's willing to look beyond what most people would say is pushing boundaries. So with his intelligence, he's able to learn things that others wouldn't because of his willingness and his intelligence, I would
I
say.
think I think that's a great idea. What about a realm of magic that he's drawn to? Like whether it's blood, shadow, fire, is there something specific that makes him more unique or does he have like a well-rounded knowledge of all magic?
I don't think it should be
Mhm.
blood or dark magic. He would dabble in those, but I think his main source of magic should be something that could be followed. Like someone would understand, like maybe like a lightning or even fire, where it could have a destructive nature, but it's still like a common realm of elements that people would be like, oh yeah, he's just using fire magic. It's understood.
What do you think of this? uh, whisperer, a magic wielder of words. So being able to manipulate people's minds, being able
Like a kill
to
grave.
steal other people's spells
Oh, I do like the
by
steal
being a
spell.
whisperer.
So,
So
Hmm.
if he's close enough, you have to have a range. And if his words, he can whisper his words so no one can hear it. But as long as somebody's within his little radius, his whispers can reach, um, and they'll reach quicker based on wind speeds in the area. And the faster that his whispers reach somebody, the quicker that his control over them. So he himself doesn't control the abilities. He controls the other people who have those abilities.
It's kind of like a master manipulator type, but with his magic, he's pulling all the strings, a puppeteer of sorts.
Yeah, what do you think of that, Alfred?
did he have this before he was uh, exiled, or is this something new that he's learned?
Before that, he was a wind user.
Yeah, I like that twist. Known for something like when he's the Lord and he was elected and people liked him, he had something that was more like useful or idolized by people. And then once he was exiled, he manipulated it for his own means. I like that.
Being a strong wind current user, being able to manipulate the wind to change its speed, to trap people in vortexes and suck oxygen out of the air, or just pick people up and push back armies with powerful winds. Wind is a great way to protect people. It's a good
Hmm.
defense and offense, like 8 trigrams, 32 palms, like Neji.
Hmm.
Um, and
Great for commerce too.
with his
Faster ships.
oh,
Hmm.
mm-hmm. Now, when you combine that with his knowledge of studying a dark book and learning the whisper technique, he's able to push his whispers with wind to widen his radius. And once his whisper hits somebody's ear, he can control that person for a certain time,
I
maybe a
also
day or two.
I also like the fact that it's contrary to what happened to him. So he if he had this power already, he would have manipulated the events and not been exiled. But that caused him to never want that to happen again. So he now has this. So if it ever did come to it, he would just manipulate people to do something else rather than point the finger at him or even confess or whatever was needed to get himself out of that situation.
Yeah.
It's like Game of Thrones when they were trying to get Cersei, they're like, confess. Well, with
Hmm.
Hatarak, he could come up to somebody and just confess.
Hmm.
And they would just go into like a binded soldier's who's binded up by chains and their eyes might flicker for a second and then they just confess everything.
So appearance, since he was a likable lord at one point, but he kind of came from a different class and worked his way up, what do we think he looks like?
Tattoos for sure, mark of poverty, mark of the impoverished. So a certain brand or tattoo that he has
Are they
that
covered
I
when
think it can be
he's
covered.
a lord? So, like
mhm,
when he's in regal outfit, they're covered, but when he's
chain
yeah.
chainmail, outer garments of leather or other woven materials with a middle belt with maybe a satchel or a side bag and a scabbard. Your classic lordly look that you would expect. Boots, maybe gloves, covering up his brand that he's embarrassed about. That if somebody else might see, he might be embarrassed about.
I think
Um,
whip lashing marks from when he was younger on his back, but again can be covered up with a shirt of some sort. Uh,
I picture like an Oliver Queen-esque looking character, kind of.
Blonde hair, light eyes, pale skin,
Yep,
clean shaven.
it's a silver or a aqua ocean colored eye or like a combination. Um, or you could do something even like, super unique and do like a indigo or shade with shades of pink or
Hmm.
just different unique things like that. If we want to go based on natives or geographically, if certain people have certain colored eyes based on where they're from. So if the slaves or the impoverished would have certain colored eyes based on um, their race or whatever, you could go that route.
I think he
Um,
also may overcompensate and not necessarily be feminine, but have almost a feminine quality as far as like hygiene, cleanliness, smelling nice, because of no longer wanting to associate himself with poverty. Uh, so
yeah,
people may view him as easily taken down, but because he was a street urchin, has some brawler techniques, maybe not traditionally trained in sword fighting and fencing and
But
stuff,
scrappy.
but yeah.
street rat, bum bum. I would say soft spoken too, almost like Peter Baelish. He's just very soft, not quite nasally, but very slow to speak, very astute, very well spoken,
With a bark.
because he doesn't want to associate himself. What's that?
I said with a bark. Like if he gets angry, you can see it, like because it is so ingrained in him that he keeps this demeanor as often as possible, but every once in a while you may see him slip into that youthful persona, uh, where like if they're talking over him or he's not getting his voice heard, he won't like slam the table and stand up or something, but like the way he can speak would draw people's attention to play into that whole
You
speaking
will
power thing.
remain silent. Just one simple phrase like that. Turn his head and silent
All right.
now. And if boundaries are pushed, use his wind and put a circular motion of wind around their neck and remove the oxygen from their lungs and choke them from a distance.
Horse joke.
The very most important question: is he sarcastic?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay, we all are in agreement there.
More sarcastic when he's become a villain.
Provoked.
He's
That
witty,
too.
I would say more so witty sarcasm when he is serving the king, and more of a attackful sarcasm when he is evil.
Yeah, Pryor uses his
I like
intelligence
that.
to kind of make fun of people subtly without their knowing, but as a villain,
hmm
more direct about it.
Blunt, abrasive, not worried about what people think
Yeah.
at that point. God, I want to write a book about this now. Um, I kid you
Or
not.
nerds, season one podcast, short story, the fall
So,
of.
are we happy with this guy, or do we want to add some more to him, or we don't want to overwork this villain?
Mm,
Leave some mystery to him.
Leave some mystery that you could always tease out in a story if we decided to write it or whatever.
Mhm.
hmm I would say, at the very least, when he does go out and become a villain, he doesn't return to the kingdom, to Windendell, right away. He goes from quaint little village to village and actually rescues and the impoverished, almost like Daenerys. He goes and finds other slaves and low poverty people and frees them from the whatever lords, and will use his newfound ability, the whisper technique, to basically just embarrass these rulers of these holdfasts and cities and towns until he's
But
taken away all of their.
the word that is spread is that he's just destroying or doing something horrible. They never mention the impoverished because they could care less about them. They don't care what happened to them, even though in his mind he's saving them from tyranny. All the aristocrat and the town gossip is he's doing horrible things, destroying these villages. So his renown is built while he's doing this, and he's expecting to hear wonderful things about himself, but he hears again he's been overlooked. His genius has been spit at, and it frustrates him even more.
I'll take it one step further. He's more confused about this because he actually wasn't the one who killed anybody. He whispered to those high lords and the people running those places, and they slaughtered each other.
Ooh.
And it was after he went there and took the impoverished and the slaves. And there was only a few survivors who might have seen all of this stuff, and all they saw was this guy show up, whisper, free people, and everybody start attacking each other and leave.
And I like that too, because it does give a little bit of gray area where who is to actually blame, the person who caused the act, or the people who are actually doing the act.
Mm-hmm.
So, real quick, do we call it echoes of madness, where after he's whispered something, people feel that manipulation and go mad from it?
Yes.
Depends on what he's whispering. Each individual person is going to be affected differently based on their personality.
But I
So
like the idea
everybody
that
perceives information different.
I like that his legacy, though, his aftermath is called Echoes of Madness. It's like, what's wrong with him? He's caught the Echoes of Madness, or this is another town fallen to the Echoes of Madness, that kind of thing, where you can add it into the dialogue and give it this sinister feel.
Oh my gosh, I'm writing a book about this.
Be my guest.
Go for it.
I am. I
Well,
can't help myself.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's how you create a villain with three masterful minds put together.
Do. It's the war of nerds. That's what we do.
Villain edition.
Oh, I like this villain.
In the comments, ladies and gentlemen, please leave a comment or a question or anything. What do you think about Hatarik Jah, the former council advisor to the king and a respected member of Windendale? What do you think of him? Do you think that him leaving and doing what he's doing, is he a good guy? Do you look at him like you look at Daenerys Targaryen? Or do you look at him as a villain? What are your thoughts? Let us know.
And let us know any villain creations you have. What would you change about him if you would? Or just tell us a villain that you've created or are interested in creating.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm going to have fun with that book. So my non-traditional last question that I have now, and Ryan, I assume you took notes on that.
Yes, I did. We got all that down.
Oh, you're beautiful. You're a wonderful human being.
Absolutely.
If you could be any villain, who would you be?
Oof. Any villain. Oh, that is a very good question. And I'm drawing a blank personally, but I want the first answer to come into my head to be the right one. And right now, Scar from the Lion King is the only one that's popping in my head.
Do.
Oh, I love
Be
it.
prepared.
And I can't say that that's a good answer, but that's
I'm
the
having
one that's
trouble.
in my mind right now. So
I would be Hatarik Jah.
Oh, well done.
Thank you.
Probably because it's what I write, but I think I'd be a fallen angel.
it's a good one. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, that was beautiful answers. And I think that pretty much brings us to our wrapping time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sticking around with us for another podcast episode. We're getting close to the end of season 1, so it's been an exciting journey up till now. And we hope you've had as much fun as we had, if not more. But that's pretty hard to have more fun than us. But yeah, and then until next time, y'all. Funky fantasy. The bowl. Stratoceros special villain creation. Hatarik Shaw. It's the war of nerds. See y'all next time.